Hey guys, name's Paul. I'm a woodworker. I've been a woodworker for 35, 40 years, somewhere in that vicinity. Today I'm going to talk to you about staining wood, and we're going to use a technique called the flood and wipe technique, which is probably the best technique for getting a nice finish on your wood. If you're dealing with woods that certain woods have knots, or their grain pattern is real mixed up, they're real soft woods. They're woods like pine, fir, maple, cherry, birch, spruce, alder, poplar, cedar. Some of those are the woods that what they'll do is if you stain them, they'll create blotches because they suck in too much stain in certain areas. So in order to do that, what we have to do is we have to seal the cells of the wood first, and so we use as a pre-stain conditioner. If you're dealing with any of those woods, and I'll put a list on the screen here. If you're dealing with any of those woods, I suggest you stop this video and go to my other video. It's called Blotch-Free Staining Technique. And that video is I'm going to show you how to use a pre-stain conditioner. So I'm actually going to use it on this because this surface is either a pine or spruce. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It might be spruce. I'm not sure. Doesn't matter. I know it's a soft wood, and I know it may not stain properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to condition the wood. But watch the other video if you've got one of those pine, fir, maple, cherry, birch, spruce, alder, poplar, cedar, one of those woods. Okay, but for this we're just going to assume that this is a normal wood and we don't need a conditioner on it. So what you're going to need is you're going to need some supplies. You're going to need some rubber gloves because stain stains and it will stain your skin. You're going to need something to apply it with. I recommend a brush, a cheap bristle brush. These are like 35, 40 cents, and you can buy them, and you throw them away once you're done with them. You're going to need a stain, obviously. We're going to need something to wipe the stain off with, so an old rag or a paper towel will do fine. And then we're going to need to clean off some of the dust and stuff like that left from sanding to prep the wood. So you're going to need mineral spirits and some clean rags for that as well. Okay, so here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to sand first, and I'll go slowly so you can see the speed of that. But what we're going to do is we're going to use a sandpaper, and what we're going to do is we're going to stop. We're going to sand coarse, then a little finer, a little finer, a little finer, but we're going to stop at a 180 grit. It's real important that you don't go finer than a 180 grit. 180 grit is a reasonably fine sandpaper, but it's still a little bit coarse. The reason is the sandpaper creates sanding dust. Wood has holes in it called pores, and if you create too fine a sanding dust, what will happen is the pores, the holes in the wood, the pores will fill with sanding dust, and then it won't accept any stain. What we want is we want to get all the dust off the wood before we stain, and then when we apply the stain, those pores will be open and they'll accept, and you'll get a deep, more penetrating, richer stain finish on it. So stop at 180 grit. Okay, so I'm using a random orbital sander. I've got a 180 grit sandpaper on it. What I want you to do, whether you're doing this by hand, whether you're using this type of sander or any other type of sander, is watch the speed at at which I sand. Sanding shouldn't go too fast because what you could do is you'll leave sanding marks in it. So you want to go about 1 inch per second. By the way, I have a video on proper sanding, so you probably want to check that out. I also have a video on grits of sandpaper. All my videos are on finishing. My specialty is finishing, and so that's what I'm here to teach you how to do properly. So I'll put links for those videos in the corners. Actually, I'll put it down below on the bottom, not in the corners. I'll put it in the bottom because that's permanent, then you don't have to worry about trying to get over there right away. All right, watch the speed that I use. I'm going to do this all the way through the whole process. I'm going to speed it up now because you really don't need to spend 10 minutes here watching me sand. Okay, so now we've sanded. The next step is to get all the dust, as much dust as we can off of there. I recommend you use either an air compressor Or if you have a vacuum cleaner, use a vacuum cleaner with one of the dust brushes on it. That'll be the first step in removing the dust. The second step is what we're going to do is we're going to use what's called tack cloth. Tack cloth is available at any big box store. It's cheesecloth with a little sticky substance on it. And what it does is it picks up any dust that we might have missed. And just as a precaution, for the last step, what I do is I take a rag dampened with mineral spirits and I wipe it down, and that'll pick up even more little sanding dust. You'll see as I do it. So follow those steps. I'm going to go through them real quick. Okay, just in case you're thinking that the first two steps, the vacuum cleaner, the air compressor, and the tack cloth should have picked up all the sawdust, let me show you. So it doesn't, and you can't be too particular about getting all that sawdust off of there, because again, we want our stain to absorb. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. It'll take a couple minutes. The reason we use mineral spirits is that it dries quickly. Water tends to wet the wood, and the wood stays wet. But mineral spirits evaporates very quickly in air. So we're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back. So this is called the flood and wipe technique, and the key here is to actually flood the wood. You want this puddled. Our finish coat, we never want to let it puddle, but on this coat, we want it puddled. We want it deep. So we're going to put it on, and we're going to let it sit until we see dry spots. I don't want to be able to see thin spots. See it. All I want to see is the darkness of the stain. Now, people will say, okay, well, the flood and wipe applies well to a flat surface, but what about a vertical surface? Well, I went out and I bought a leg, just so I could kind of demonstrate to you. You can still flood and wipe it. It's just not going to lay on as heavy, but not going to puddle, but you can lay it on pretty darn thick. And the same principle. Now this is going to soak in, and it's going to dry a lot faster than this, because on this I didn't put a conditioner on this. So this is raw wood, okay? This has got a conditioner on it, so it's not going to absorb as much stain as this one did. Okay, I'm not seeing any dry spots yet, so starting a little bit, so that means that it's soaking in, and we're going to let it soak. And this one I'm already seeing dry spots on, okay? So I'm going to wipe it down. That's pretty much it. And again, this is this is espresso, so it's almost a black stain. When I wipe this off, if it's too light, I'll apply another coat on there. You can apply 2 coats of stain, and then you pretty much have to stop. If you try to do a third coat of stain, what will happen is the pores will absorb some of it, but when the humidity changes a little bit or the temperature changes, it'll start to regurgitate it. So you'll get wet areas. It's belching it up, and we don't want that. So the rule is 2 coats is the maximum. Okay, I'm going to wipe it off. I'm starting to see some dry spots. Now, because there's a conditioner on it, because again, let me show you the difference. Because there's a conditioner on it, you can see how black this one turned out and this one did not. Because the conditioner prevented it from absorbing as much stain. And that's classically what will happen when you use a conditioner. But you have to use a conditioner, otherwise you'll get areas of blotching. Okay. Pretty good. Looks okay. I'm happy with it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to let this dry. This will dry overnight. And then tomorrow, we'll come back and we're going to put another coat on it. Tips. Throw your rags and brushes, anything that's soaked in any kind of chemicals, be it mineral spirits or oils. Take them outside, throw them in the garbage immediately. What these can do is spontaneously combust. They can start a fire. Okay, so it's the next morning, and today I'm going to put the second coat on. So let's get started. Same pretty much procedure as the first coat. What we're going to do is flood and wipe. So you want to put it on thick. I could actually just pour it on if you want. That's fine. And we're going to lay it right down. And because this came out lighter than expected, I'm going to leave it on a little bit longer. Again, the theory is the longer the stain sits, the deeper it soaks in. But so you could take a section and wipe it, and I see the color is not yet where I want it, so I'm going to cover it. I'm going to keep the areas wet for now. It's not a thin coat that I apply. This is a heavy coat. I mean, it's wet. I don't have to apply any more stain. I just move around some of the puddles that are there. Okay, so we're going to let it sit for a little while longer. So it's getting darker, but it's kind of slow. The recommendation on the can is 5 to 15 minutes, but again, sometimes 5 minutes is too long. But you see how it's soaked in? I mean, instantly. I mean, we put it on and we pretty much just wiped it off because the wood was dry and thirsty. So the pores are open because it was dried in a kiln and it was heat dried. The pores were very thirsty and it soaked it up very rapidly, and we wiped it right off. A lot different from the looks of, I can get from the looks of that. I mean, so this is espresso, so it's almost a black stain, and you could see like some of the grain is black and some of the grain is more is obviously a brown. So but we want this dark, so we want not quite as dark as this. I'm not looking for that, but I want it dark, so I'm going to leave it on a little bit longer. So there are really no dry spots on here. If your stain dries and you see a dry spot, you want to wipe it all off, because what will happen is the dry spot won't accept any more stain, and the other areas are still absorbing the stain. So what will happen is the dry spot will be lighter than the surrounding areas. So when you see a dry spot, wipe it off. And then in this case, there are no dry spots. It stays wet. So I can leave this. Now, there's another option. By the way, if you see a dry spot and you don't like the color of it, just move some of the puddled stain over the area and let it keep absorbing. What you want to do is you want it all to dry uniformly, or you want to wipe it all off uniformly, because if one area is absorbing and another area isn't, then you're going to have color variations. So just keep an eye on it. In this case, it's all wet, so I'm not concerned about it. What I'm going to do is, as I've been doing, I'm going to do a little test wipe, and I'm going to see what the color looks like underneath. And it's getting pretty close to what I want. This is an espresso stain, but I knew going into it that what would happen was, because I was putting a conditioner on it, because this is a wood that needs a conditioner, I knew it wasn't going to absorb the stain the same way that bare wood would. Again, this is bare wood, and this is the same stain. So you can see how dark it is versus areas in here. There are certain spots that are dark, but there's certain spots in the grain that didn't absorb it. So I knew that was going to happen. So I went a little darker than I wanted the finished product to be. Okay, so I'm pretty close. It's getting pretty close to what I want, color-wise. And I don't know if you can. I can tell what's happening is the stain. It's starting to get a little more difficult to work with. In other words, it's thickening up. So I'm pretty close to about wiping this off. I'm going to give it a few more minutes. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to let this dry overnight. I'm going to come out and I'm going to check a couple times, maybe about a half hour, maybe about 2 hours. And what I'm checking for is bleeding. And bleeding is a regurgitation of stain. So if there's areas that it starts to regurgitate, I'm just going to wipe it off. Well, all in all, happy with the way the stain turned out. Next step is we'll let it dry 24 hours. Then we have to choose a finish. By the way, I have a video on choosing finishes. There's 5 basic chemistries in clear wood finish. There might be hundreds, might be thousands of different finishes out there. But they're all one of 5 basic chemistries. It seems like each manufacturer takes takes a finish and tweaks it a little bit, maybe mixes it with a little something else, puts their own name on it, maybe even changes the name of the finish, and then markets it at a really high price. So watch that video. It'll give you the ins and outs of finishes. It'll talk about the 5 basic chemistries there are in finishing. And it'll guide you in the right direction, because some finishes are luxurious and soft and vibrant, and some of them are durable and tough and hard. Some of them just have a great feel to them, and some feel plasticky. So there's a whole bunch of different things to consider. So watch that video. It'll give you a clear-cut direction. If you like the video, please subscribe. Please leave a comment. I love to hear from you guys. If you have questions, ask. I'm retired, so pretty much I sit here first thing in the morning, last thing at night, and I love to answer questions. So if you got some concerns, please do it. Like the video, subscribe if you want more, and hey, happy woodworking. Glad I could be a little part of your journey.